Hello and welcome to the Debrief. I'm Angus Scott. Over the course of the season here on the Debrief, we have discussed players, managers, and clubs' futures, bringing you the knowledge and experience of dozens of journalists, ex-players, and coaches. Today, we return to the managers, not least because of Jurgen Klopp's dramatic announcement that he was to leave Arsenal at the end of the season. We've discussed that, of course, before on the Debrief. But for what that means to the managerial merry-go-round that is bound to ensue during the summer. Klopp leaves Liverpool, so where does that leave De Zerbi? Tuchel leaves Munich, so where does that leave Bayern? Alonso stays put in Leverkusen, so where does that leave Real? He'll need a manager in 26 when Ancelotti leaves. And what about Ruben Amorim? If he leaves after another title at Sporting, is he bound for Anfield or the Allianz? And will Moyes leave West Ham, Poch, Stamford Bridge, and Ten Hag depart Old Trafford? Are there enough good managers to go round? The summer of 24 will be busy. Who's who in the hot seat? Thankfully, Ben Jacobs has quite a few pointers on what might happen across Europe, and as ever, I'm pleased to say, is with me. Ben, hi there.
How are you doing? As you say, a merry-go-round ahead of us.
It's going to be a busy summer, and I always find it more exciting when managers start switching seats rather than players.
Well, I think when a manager comes in, it's either because, like Jurgen Klopp, it's planned, there's an announcement, there's a farewell, or because a team isn't moving in the right direction and there's a mismatch between a project and the person in charge. So if you're a neutral, of course, it's very exciting. And there's a lot of top names out there. You mentioned many of them in your introduction. But the reality is there's quite a few clubs that will feel unsettled. And in modern media, the process to hire a manager is so public that you often know as a fan if you've got your number one, your number two, or your number three choice. And many of these clubs are going for the same targets. So we're in a strange situation, really, because last summer was about midfielders moving. The gap between the January window and now has been about recruitment experts moving. And part of that is because Jim Ratcliffe's come in at Manchester United and Chelsea are very active on the recruitment front. And then this summer is going to be about who are the right managers for big clubs. And in addition, striker merry-go-round movements as well. So I think that we're in for a busy year. And the best place to start is probably Liverpool. And I don't know what your thoughts are, Angus, but my take is that Liverpool, of all of the clubs that we're about to speak about, want their process to be as discreet as possible.
You know what Liverpool's like. I know what Liverpool is like. We've dealt with them a lot during our careers. They do everything behind closed doors and they want to come up with a finished product and then announce it to everyone rather than it leaks somewhere and we all know who it might be. And then it's no surprise when that person eventually turns up. And that's not the way Liverpool work.
No, it isn't. They have a process. And therefore, when we hear a lot of these names, we have to understand that it's step by step. So at the moment, to give an update, and I stress this very clearly, Tuesday lunch, because things can move very quickly. Liverpool haven't actually given an interview, formally speaking, to any candidate. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to conclude that Ruben Amorim is a front runner. And there has been some contact made on the agent side around things like terms and contract length. And that's a normal part of due diligence. But it's obvious that Liverpool are going to be able to get Amorim, financially speaking. He's only on about €3 million a year at Sporting at the moment. But just because they're talking to Amorim, it doesn't mean that there's an agreement in principle yet. And there's been no formal offer to Sporting either. And I would expect Liverpool, even if, as many expect, Amorim gets the job, to still do at least 3 formal interviews, because that's their process. Stage 1, get in Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes. Stage 2, start the process, which was informed by data gathered last year. Stage 3, work out who's on the final shortlist. And then stage 4, interview and pick a candidate. What they don't tend to do, Liverpool, is just decide on one name and put all of their eggs in that basket, which is why they were relatively unconcerned when Xabi Alonso said he was staying at Leverkusen because they had other options, and Amorim is one of them. The other thing I'd say about Amorim is that Sporting, again, when we're recording it now, maybe when people listen to this, the story's moved on a little bit. But as of now, Sporting haven't had any kind of offer from Liverpool either. And you would expect that, because if they've not done the formal interviews, why would they be approaching any club? So there may be people within Liverpool that sense the direction of travel. It wouldn't surprise anybody if it's Amorim, but knowing Liverpool, I'd be equally unsurprised if they went in a surprise direction as well, at least as far as who they are formally interviewing. But when or if any club goes to Sporting, they also have to agree a deal. And Amorim has 2 release clauses, 30 million euros for Portuguese clubs, but he's not going to move within Portugal, 20 million euros for European clubs, and then a verbal agreement, a gentleman's pact of 10 million euros for a top club. And this is the most interesting part of the negotiation for me, if it gets to that point, because top club in a verbal agreement is very vague, and there's a grey area, because everyone knows that Liverpool's a top club, brilliant history, fan base, they're going to get Champions League next season, come what may. But you can define top club, if you're Sporting, as at the time of negotiation, a Champions League club. And Liverpool are not in the Champions League this season. So it may well be that Sporting say, you can't have him for 10 million because there's a grey area. We understand you don't want to pay 20 million euros. Maybe they meet halfway. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's not as simple as Liverpool, should they want Amorim, just saying, here's 10 million euros. We know about this verbal pact. Maybe they will have to pay a fraction more, but probably not as much as 20 million euros.
I mean, it would be a huge loss for Sporting. I went over there last year when Arsenal were playing them. And I actually didn't know much about Ruben Amorim at the time, and walked past him in the corridor. And I thought, I wonder who you are. You're the best dressed man in this stadium. And it was Ruben Amorim. And I just thought there was a way about him that you look at some managers and they have an aura, they have a presence about them. And the way that Sporting crowd had bought into what he has brought to the club and how he'd made them successful and how he stands on the verge of winning another title, which Sporting have been crying out for so many years. I just felt that he was that sort of person. And I clearly wasn't thinking about that at the time because it was about 12 months ago, but he is that sort of person who could fill Anfield with aura, with personality, and fill those shoes that Jurgen Klopp had.
Yeah, stylistically as well, it would lead to a very smooth transition between the kind of football that Klopp plays and Amorim's philosophy. He's very data driven, but there are those within Portugal that feel a step up to Liverpool would be a risk. And the other thing we have to say, if we're only looking historically and a bit more academically, which I often like to do for context, is if you look at any first manager to succeed, a legendary manager that's had success and longevity at a club, not many of them actually succeed. Manchester United still haven't replaced Sir Alex Ferguson, just to give one example. I'm not positive that the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona, when they've had a sustained period of success with top managers, the next appointment hasn't always worked. So it's difficult because you build a culture and you don't want to be reliant on a manager in your model only. Otherwise, if that manager carries too much authority and autonomy, when they leave, they take the insight, the data, the tactics, the relationships, the unity, the culture with them. And this is why, even though not every fan likes it, models are made to be future-proof. And managers are increasingly getting less control because then if they go, whoever comes in has a much smoother transition. And I think with Amorim, he would take very well to Liverpool. I think he could rise to the challenge, but there's no guarantee that succeeding Klopp is going to work. And I think it will be a consideration for any candidate. You would think that Liverpool would just come along and say, we're Liverpool. And any young manager, talented manager, if that was their only option anyway, would say, wow, of course I want to join. But how do you know that it's not going to be detrimental being the one coming immediately after Klopp? You'll know better than most, Angus, with David Moyes, groomed to be the next Sir Alex Ferguson. And for whatever reason, very quickly, it just didn't work.
It didn't work. And I know that affected David a lot, because I worked with him after he'd been sacked by Old Trafford. And you could see that he still wore the scars that he had at Old Trafford. And he felt it was unjust, his sacking. He wasn't given the support that he needed. He wasn't given the time that he was clearly needed, or he felt he needed, after Fergie's long tenure. And it haunted him for quite a time. And it's only in more recent years, when he's found success with West Ham, that I think he's now come out of himself. He can look back on that time at United and think that he's a better man and a better manager for it. So filling in Jurgen Klopp's shoes will be very difficult. And maybe that's why Xabi Alonso has said, do you know what, I'm going to stay at Leverkusen. It's too big a role. At this stage in my career, I probably can go there, 3 or 4 different times throughout my career. I've only just started as a manager. I can go there another time. Or you can look at it in another way and say, well, actually, they are at the top. I've got decent players. I've got everything behind me. I've got a new team at the top. And effectively, they're going to drive it even further forward, even quicker. So it's a great time to be there. So you can balance the argument on both ways. Anyway, I think we need to get to Fabrizio, because you spoke to him a little bit earlier, Ben, and we're asking him some of these questions, most notably about what's going to happen at Anfield.
Fabrizio, great to see you as ever. We're talking about managers on the go, and there might be a bit of a merry-go-round over the course of this summer. And I think we have to start with Ruben Amorim. Many people saying he is a leading candidate for Liverpool, some even intimating there might be a formal interview in the month of April. What are you hearing?
He's the favorite candidate for sure at this stage. It's not something done, so we have to wait and see what Liverpool will decide to do. But as of today, he's the leading candidate for sure. He's a really strong one, because Liverpool are discussing this possibility internally. Liverpool also made contact with people close to Ruben Amorim. This is something that they didn't do, for example, with Roberto De Zerbi or any other of the names we saw in the media in the recent weeks. So for sure, Ruben Amorim is a strong candidate. There will be more discussions to follow about Ruben Amorim possibility to become the new Liverpool manager, and they're also well informed on his contract situation. From what I'm hearing, is 30 million euros release clause for clubs in Portugal, 20 million euros release clause for clubs from abroad. But there is kind of gentleman agreement between Amorim as sporting president to leave the club in the summer in case of top club proposal around 10 million euros. So this could be a very good news for Liverpool in terms of obviously budget and how much they have to spend on the coach. And so Amorim for sure is one of the candidates, and in this moment the leading candidate for Liverpool job.
And a few Liverpool players may see their future intertwined with whoever the new manager is. There's lots of talk about Mo Salah's future and another big offer potentially from Saudi Arabia. Do you think Salah's going to wait, though, before deciding on his future to determine who that new Liverpool manager is? Or do you expect him to decide before?
No, I don't expect him to decide before. I think Salah will take some time to understand what's next with Liverpool. I think it's not just about Saudi. It's normal for important players to wait and to see what the club wants to do in terms of project, manager, and all the ideas they have for present and future. So when you are a player like Mo Salah, it's absolutely normal process. He's waiting, Van Dijk is waiting, all the players are now waiting to understand what's next. Already with the board structure, they did an excellent job to bring in important people, and now it's about the manager. The manager is absolutely crucial to decide about the future. So I think they're just waiting for that, and then they will have a discussion with the club and make a decision on the future. But I don't expect Mo Salah to decide before. I'm also hearing that Mo Salah is really happy at Liverpool. He's being super professional. He was never creating any issue, even in the final days of the summer transfer window when they received really big proposal from Saudi. He was always super committed and professional. So I don't see Mo Salah deciding before, honestly.
Let's move on to Manchester United. Erik ten Hag said after the draw with Liverpool that his side have effectively dropped 7 points in the space of about 7 days. What's the latest on his future?
Yeah, I think Ineos still want to see how this season will continue for the final months, the final weeks now, and then to discuss internally. But I'm still hearing that the conversations they had since January, February with Erik ten Hag has always been something positive in terms of exchange. So they're happy with the conversations they're having with Erik ten Hag. They are discussing the future with Erik ten Hag, but obviously we are in a results industry, and so obviously they want to see how the season will be in the next weeks. What's going to be the reaction from the team? So I think it's absolutely normal process also in this case. They want to keep monitoring the situation around Ten Hag, but at the same time, the conversation has been positive. So I'm not aware of anything close in terms of discussions with other managers. And I think we still have to be patient to understand the future of Manchester United in terms of manager.
And is it a similar situation for Mauricio Pochettino at Chelsea?
Yeah, really similar, but in this case, it's something that was already planned even close to the beginning of the season, October, November, when we started to see the situation complicated around Chelsea because of this young team, as Pochettino is always mentioning. Chelsea position has always been really clear and really the same. At the end of the season, we will assess the situation with the manager. We will discuss about present and future. So this remains their position. Obviously, they can't be happy with results as the last one we saw against Sheffield United. And in general, the season has been quite disappointing in the Premier League, but at the same time, they have another opportunity now in FA Cup. So for sure, they will wait. And then at the end of the season, they will speak to Pochettino and decide.
Just a quick word on Juventus and Ajax. What's your understanding on Max Allegri? And as far as Ajax's search for a new boss, is there any truth that Graham Potter was spoken to?
Yeah, about Juventus, my understanding is that for Massimiliano Allegri is more than concrete the possibility to leave the club at the end of the season. This is the expectation. My sources tell me that the expectation is for Allegri to leave. Basically, he still has 1 year of contract at Juventus, so let's see how they will find an agreement on that final year of contract. But the feeling is that they will part ways, and Allegri will not be the manager of Juventus in the upcoming season 24-25. And for Ajax, they have a list of candidates. It's true that Graham Potter is part of that list, but at the moment, Potter is not super keen on that possibility. Let's see if it's going to change. But at the moment, from what I'm hearing, is not something close or something advanced. He's one of 4 names they have in the short list. It's a difficult moment for Ajax on and off the pitch. So that's why the timing might be different than what they expected 2 or 3 weeks ago. But the short list is still there. They have multiple ideas, multiple candidates. The internal discussion is still ongoing. And also in this case, I don't think we'll have a new coach in the space of some days. It will take some time.
So those are the managers potentially on the move. Let's talk about some big names that could also change clubs during the summer. A lot of talk at the moment about Bruno Guimaraes, especially because Newcastle may need to raise funds, especially if they don't get European football. How likely do you think a summer exit is for Guimaraes?
I think it's a possibility because when you are a special player like Bruno Guimaraes in a position where many top clubs are always looking for players in the midfield, we know, and we saw even last summer how busy was the market and how busy is going to be the market in this upcoming summer. I think it's normal for a player like Bruno to be in the rumors. The interest is there from multiple clubs. I don't think this is something that will be clarified like April, May, or even early June. I think this is something for July, August, because the release clause is there, is £100 million. So I'm still told that the clause is going to be valid this summer, and it's going to be obviously a big opportunity for many clubs. But also, this is not something easy to complete in the first days of the transfer window. For many clubs to spend that money before the end of June is not going to be easy, but we know for Newcastle, because of financial fair play, how important is going to be the timing of negotiations to maybe sell some player and make some money, make some profit and reinvest that money. So timing will be a really crucial point. At the moment, I'm not aware of any advanced negotiation, but interest is there. This is the reality. And so it's a possibility for Bruno to leave Newcastle.
And surely Newcastle won't want to lose Alexander Isak, but is there any truth that he's one of many names on Arsenal's list of possible strikers?
Arsenal always appreciated him. Even when he was at Real Sociedad, they've always been scouting him. He's always been considered the really talented striker. Also for the style they have, he's always been appreciated. Again, at the moment, I'm not aware of direct contacts to negotiate for Alexander Isak, so it's not something really concrete at this point. But also, I don't see Newcastle selling 2 or 3 important players. I think they will have to make a decision together with the players to understand who is the one who could leave the club. This is something that could happen in the summer, but I don't see them selling 2 or 3 important pieces of their project. So that's why I think for Arsenal, it's not going to be easy in this case with Alexander Isak. It's also important to say that they have multiple candidates. We know about Gyökeres. There are also other names in the list, so it's not the only one for sure.
Karim Benzema's been speaking publicly about how difficult it's been for him over recent months at Al Ittihad. Clearly, the Saudi club would like to keep him, but could a move be possible this summer? And will it be within Saudi or outside of it?
Yes, from what I'm hearing, it's a really concrete possibility for Karim Benzema to leave Al Ittihad. It's a complicated moment for him. As you mentioned, he was speaking in public, but he's not happy with the general situation. He's not scoring goals since December, and the feeling between Benzema and also the manager at the moment is not that easy. So to manage, it's not something really easy on the pitch. Also, Benzema said they can't win games alone. Here, the situation is completely different compared to Real Madrid. So he's not super happy about the situation. And what I'm hearing is that there is a concrete possibility for Karim Benzema to leave in the summer. There is still a chance for him to remain in Saudi. Saudi Pro League bosses already in January were very clear with Benzema. No chance to leave for European club. Maybe a chance to leave and stay in the Saudi Pro League. This was in January. Let's see what's going to be in the summer. There will be a conversation for sure, but I think there is a really concrete possibility to see Karim Benzema with a different shirt in the summer transfer window.
If we move over to North America, Lionel Messi came back from injury and scored his first goal of the season for Inter Miami. And another star name is very close to agreeing a deal. Olivier Giroud with Los Angeles FC. How close is that one to being 100% signed and sealed?
I think we are around 99, 98% because just waiting on the final details of the contract. It's about the lawyers now, exchanging all the documents, checking all the legal part of the story, all the taxes and part of the story. So they are discussing the final steps of this agreement, but the verbal agreement is there. So my expectation is for Olivier Giroud to become a new LAFC player in the next weeks. Is just a matter of time. I think he also wants to be respectful of Milan, so to announce in the right moment and not to create any problem to Milan because they are still competing not just in the Serie A but especially in Europa League. It could be a special season for them in Europe. So Giroud wants to respect the timing, but my expectation doesn't change. I see Giroud becoming a new LFC player in the next weeks.
And just finally, let's talk about a really young talent. I know you like the stars of the future. And this particular player, Franco Mastantuono, is only 16 years of age, but has a massive amount of interest from seemingly all over Europe. Give me the details.
Yeah, many clubs. I think it's also normal. This boy is really special. He's a midfielder born in 2007 with a lot of talent. He's really interesting player, and this is why Real Madrid already sent their scouts multiple times to follow him, and they will keep sending because they believe Franco Mastantuono has huge potential. Also people from Barcelona, people from Chelsea, Paris Saint-Germain, but they signed Moscardo, and obviously they have Zaire Emery in that position, so this is why it's not a super priority for them, but they're still monitoring the South American market. So multiple clubs are keeping close eye to him. It's not going to be easy because River Plate were able to extend his contract a couple of weeks ago. It's 45 million euros already closed, becoming 50 in the final 10 days of the summer transfer window. So not easy at all, but there is a lot of interest, and I think Mastantuono will be one to watch in the next months for sure.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one for sure. Fabrizio, great to catch up as ever. Keep up the good work. We'll speak to you next week.
Thank you. Thank you. See you next week. Ciao.
Ciao.
As ever, fascinating to hear what Fabrizio had to say. Let's move on to Pochettino, Ben, and your close ties at Chelsea. It's always been what's going to happen at the end of the season, and as we sit on the verge of a cup semi-final and Chelsea slowly moving up that table, not far behind United now, European football could come. Perhaps this project is working. Last week we were talking about the short-term project. Maybe the project is working and Poch will be there at the beginning of next season.
I think Chelsea fans are disappointed because there was such drama when they beat Manchester United 4-3, even though they were 3-2 down after 99 minutes. And then you go away at Sheffield United and you concede in injury time and they had just 6 shots on goal. And they're the only team that have gone to Sheffield United and had less than 10 attempts on goal. So it's either 1 step forwards, 1 step back, or 1 step forwards, 2 steps back. And come summer, the ownership will have to determine whether Pochettino's to blame, whether the project itself is to blame, or whether actually what we see now is not reflective, because as Chelsea's young players grow and become more consistent, these kind of things won't happen. And this is where they're looking at data. And Chelsea fans will say, well, data-wise, if we look at the second half after Poch's team talk, we're in the second half of the table and pretty close to the relegation zone. And the ownership will say we're creating big chances. And as the players mature, they'll make less errors, they'll concede less goals, they'll take more of the big chances, and then Chelsea will fly up the table. And it's fine margins. The Sheffield United draw was disappointing because had Chelsea won that game, they then would have only been 3 points behind sixth place Manchester United with a game in hand. So it's very tight between about 10th or 12th in the table all the way up to sixth place. But remember, Chelsea's aim at the beginning of the season was Champions League football. So Pochettino's position is likely to still be judged at the end of the season. And the reason for that is because this was a pre-hire plan. Pochettino's got a 3-year contract, possibly third year as a club option. So only 2 years are guaranteed. And a decision was made before Pochettino started, when he got offered the job, to review him in the summer. And Chelsea at the moment plan to stick to that. And I think if they are to have a busy summer and Pochettino is to stay, then the first 10 games of next season are going to be very important, because then Chelsea will have completed their 4-window plan and the fan base will say, stop telling us about what you're going to do and what is part of your project and part of your progress, and now tell us why the success isn't more instant, because you've had that 4 windows. So the project can be viewed through a slightly different lens once this 4-window plan, which Chelsea believe is their kind of first phase of recruitment, is complete. And this is why I think the ownership are quite calm, and they could well go through the summer and put a bit of pressure on Pochettino if he stays to get an instant return from the first 10 games of the season. Whereas with Ten Hag, who Fabrizio kind of covered, so we don't need to go into too much detail, it's different because it was a different regime compared to Ratcliffe. There was no pre-plan to judge him and nothing is yet decided. There's no indication he's definitely leaving yet, but whereas Pochettino has sensed for much of the season he would get a season and he'd have the opportunity to have a 2-way appraisal and still will in likelihood, Ten Hag is maybe a bit more looking over his shoulder because there's a new regime that have come in and he's not been given any guarantees yet. So they've also not told him he's leaving, but they've certainly not said to his face that he's definitely staying either.
What about David Moyes, though? I mentioned him earlier on, and there's nothing he needs to prove at West Ham. He's won a European trophy with West Ham. He's had them higher up the table than many would have expected. He saved them from relegation when he came first time. But I wonder if I wouldn't call it a love affair, but his relationship with West Ham has just naturally come to the end. And I think Moyes might just take his foot off the accelerator and say, do you know what? For a bit, I'm just moving aside.
Again, there's just so many managers out there as well. And as that merry-go-round happens, if you think the right name's available at the right time, even if you like David Moyes, you might choose to replace him because of opportunism. We haven't mentioned somebody like Thiago Motta, for example, who's doing a great job at Bologna. That kind of profile could be of appeal to many clubs. Graham Potter is still a free agent as well. But I do feel sorry for David Moyes because in December, he made it very clear that he felt a new contract would be sorted early in the new year. And it was just a matter of formalities. And now that new contract hasn't been signed. And we don't really know why there's been a specific delay. But the fact that it hasn't been sorted and Moyes felt that it would be in either late December or early January, it tells you that West Ham have not committed yet to Moyes in the long term. And the longer it ticks on between now and the end of the season, the more you start to think a new deal won't be forthcoming. Otherwise, it already would have been signed. So it's still not definite that he departs. But I think when you called it a natural conclusion appears to be manifesting, I think that is the most accurate way of putting it at this stage.
One thing we haven't discussed, Ben, these are club managers we're talking about who are moving around. We can throw other names into the mix after the Euros. Julian Nagelsmann, Gareth Southgate. These could be names that other clubs have already thought, I'm going in there. That's who I want.
Yeah, people are making links between Southgate and Manchester United. My understanding remains that all Manchester United are doing is succession planning. And so are Chelsea at the moment. There's a difference between hiring and succession planning. Succession planning is something that you do, so there's no managerial limbo. It doesn't mean you're interviewing. It doesn't mean you're going behind your manager's back. Day one, when Chelsea hired Pochettino, they were likely succession planning because it's quite a short-term contract. And Ineos are looking at names, but that doesn't mean they've decided Ten Hag's fate. And the links come because Ashworth, who's coming in as sporting director at Manchester United, worked with Southgate at the FA. So I think that type of link gets overblown at this stage. And we have to wait and see how Southgate does, because ultimately how England perform at the Euros will in many ways determine whether the FA want to keep with Southgate and whether Southgate wants to stay on at the FA. Nagelsmann, I think, would be tempted by a club job. Who knows? Bayern might come crawling back. But by the same token, if they were to win the Euros, I think the German FA would say we want to keep him for the World Cup as well. So there's a few variables, but we're unlikely to know the future of any of our Euros managers before the Euros finishes.
As if the drama wasn't enough, we've actually got to watch the Euros with the possibility of either England or Germany or all the other sides there winning or not winning, and all that drama we've got to go through before we know. And it's difficult for those managers as well, isn't it? They want success because that sharpens up their CV for any prospective job that they're moving on to. But I think there would be any number of clubs that would have Gareth Southgate now after what he's done to England.
Possibly, but what you do with England when you're blessed with talent and another golden generation coming through with your Bellinghams, Kobbie Mainoo, you could even say, very much in the pitch for selection, Declan Rice, goals from Harry Kane. I think to go into a club and have the day-to-day politics and have to get your recruitment right with a wider team, Southgate doesn't really have that club record pedigree. And therefore, if he was to leave England, it would likely only be for one of the very big clubs, Big Six or Big Seven if we include Newcastle United. And personally, I'm not sure that would work. Whereas Nagelsmann's the other way around. He's got a home Euros with Germany out of largely opportunism. It wasn't planned, nor was his Bayern exit. That came as a surprise to him and many. But he does have the pedigree at club level. So I think he would be better suited, if he has a good Euros, to going back to a big club at domestic level, in my opinion anyway, than Gareth Southgate.
Just before we wrap up, Ben, any other names that might be of interest in the managerial hot seat merry-go-round that we're anticipating?
Well, I think we've mentioned Xabi Alonso and obviously staying at Leverkusen. And you said in your intro, Carlo Ancelotti, 2026 Real Madrid. That's right, contractually. But there is a feeling that 2025 might be an opportunity at Real Madrid as well. So maybe Alonso does another year at Leverkusen, has great success, leads them in the Champions League, and possibly, it's ifs and buts because there's been no contact at this point, but Real Madrid might come calling for Alonso as well. Then we should mention Thomas Tuchel, who's leaving Bayern Munich. He's naturally going to be linked with a variety of clubs. I'd be surprised if it's a Chelsea return. But one thing I would say is that Tuchel feels he's got unfinished business with the Premier League. I mentioned Thiago Motta, very well respected, having performed well at Bologna. So he's going to be in the mix. Will Still is another young manager that I think a few clubs might be looking at. He's done brilliantly in the last 18 months or so as well. And then if we just come back to the Premier League, it's funny how often the likes of Thomas Frank and Roberto De Zerbi make their way onto short lists. And Frank might struggle because Brentford are not the same team this season as last season to step up to a really big club. But I do think he's a good fit with many models and could shine if given the opportunity. And obviously the last name, and the one we should finish with, is Roberto De Zerbi, who is continually linked with a variety of clubs. Liverpool, still as of now, haven't made any contact with him. He's also been linked with the Bayern vacancy. Some have linked him with Barcelona as well. But we know from how De Zerbi's speaking publicly that a new contract and an extension at Brighton is still unresolved. And at times, he's kind of sounded a bit frustrated with the limitations of a model like Brighton, even though it's a phenomenally well-run club. Maybe he feels there's only so far that he can take Brighton. So this summer, very possibly, or certainly within the next 2 summers, Roberto De Zerbi is another one who's likely to be on the move.
It is fascinating. As I said at the beginning of the show, I just think it's more interesting this summer than more or less any other personnel move. We've had your directors of football, as you pointed out, Ben. We will have our strikers because there are so many clubs who need a number 9. So there's going to be, and how many times have we spoken about Victor Osimhen and where will he will end up? Probably the most wanted number 9 across Europe. So it's going to be fascinating, but none more so than what actually happens in the dugout. And maybe and Jurgen Klopp has started off the domino effect and who goes in the Anfield hot seat, and then we'll find out where everyone else fits in afterwards. My thanks, Ben. Always great to have your company on the debrief and your insight. My thanks to Fabrizio Romano as well. He is with us every single week, giving us the inside track on the transfer market, whether that's players or managers or even directors of football. From me, Angus Scott, thanks for listening. We'll be with you next week.